Okay, so welcome to another episode, she said very loosely, an episode of Clean Conversations with Caitlin. So this is an opportunity for me to find people that I love and respect, who've got interesting ideas that are either I want to learn about or I want to wrestle with. And the frame for our conversation is this is a space where we can talk about anything that we're interested in, and we might say things we don't believe in. Yeah, so I know.
Sounds exciting.
Yeah, Olaf and I talked about this before. I think sometimes when you work in the public field, we can start to censor ourselves. And what I don't get to see, and I don't get to have a lot of professional engagement in, is deep conversations where we're learning together. And I want to be able to say something that might be abhorrent or wrong because I'm thinking it, and reflect on it and go, where did that come from? You know, that sounds odd. And I would like you to do the same. So if we just, if we can agree that we might say things that we wish we hadn't said or we don't really believe in, and once we've said them, we can both inquire into them.
Yep.
So the topic for today is unmasking. We're going to talk a little bit about it. It's something that that Olaf and I both feel that we're doing at the minute. We're going to look a little bit at the costs and benefits, and then any insights that we're having, not necessarily in this order.
Yes.
So welcome. So Olaf,
thank you.
Talk to me a little bit about unmasking for you.
Well, the recent new experience I've had is that starting last year when I came back to conferences after COVID, and as people who know me will know, because that's where most of the people who know me have met me, is that I used to really enjoy conferences. I really used to enjoy the crowd. I used to dive in, and people named me the biggest hugger ever and things like that. So lots of contact, lots of conversations, early morning, deep nights, always with people. And I thought I enjoyed it. And when I came back to Agile 2022 in Nashville last year, a person I know well came to me, hey, good to see you. I'm so glad this time is over. And I was like, what do you mean? This blissful peace we had? She looked at me and was, oh, yes. I was like, something's different now. And I noticed, I think what happened was that the part of me that I had neglected, that is introvert, shy, whatever label you could put on it, but specifically in groups that are larger than this, larger than 3-4 people, feels watched, feels I need to fit in, feels oh shit, people's attention is on me, what's going to happen now, feels insecure. That part, I guess I've probably repressed that since school. At least that's, I don't have a memory of actively showing that anywhere. It's shown itself to me now a few times. It's shown up in a few interesting and usually very painful situations. Just a week ago, I was in a training setting. So I was participant in a training, and people were invited to go into groups and just watch each other and give each other feedback on what impression do you make. And it was in a therapist context. So the idea was, imagine I'm your therapist and tell me what you see, tell me what you think, tell me about any impact that anything that I evoke, or my presence, my outlook, my whatever evokes. Tell me about that. And it was set up very badly. I could go on about all the reasons why I didn't like that, but I didn't want to go. I didn't want to run away. Part of me wanted to run away, but I didn't. So I sat there on a chair. I was like, if I had a weapon, I might kill people. I would like to jump out of the window, but it was just one floor up, so it wouldn't have really helped. And I managed to tell the group that I'm not really here. I'm currently just focused on not running away. I need to manage myself. And it took me about half an hour of self-regulation. And usually my self-regulation is really, really good.
So
in order to just be there And there was so much rage inside and so much.
And if this had been 3 years ago, and you were neglecting that part of you that you're now not neglecting, what would you have done? What would it have been? What do you imagine it might have been like 3 years ago?
I wouldn't have noticed. I wouldn't have, maybe 3 years ago, I would have noticed that there's a slight discomfort. 5 years ago, I wouldn't have noticed. I would have just gone in and, hey, it's an exercise, we participate. I just play along. And I would have said things to people that would have hurt them because it was this weird setup with unsafe feedback. I would have heard things that hurt me. And I would have neglected that too. And thought like, well, they are just doing the exercise. Obviously, there's something about me that whatever. And I think I would have even thought that I learned something in the exercise. And as I'm putting this together in my imagination, it's like, yeah, I feel the word that comes as a label is torture. It feels. It's a very, very, very bad, very deep sensation that's just wrong. And I can't remember feeling like that very often in my life, generally. It's a level of pain that, and my life has not been pain-free, not at all. But it's a level of pain that I've really rarely experienced.
And so this comes on to a point that I want to look at a little bit later, which is what are the costs and benefits of masking and the costs and benefits of unmasking. So if I take my stuff, a couple of things happened through lockdown. One is that we spent quite a bit of time. I have a child who's always been a little unusual, and we realized that his school closed and we couldn't find a school place for him. And part of that is because it became clear that he had needs that a school needed to meet. And so in order to make that demand, we had to get him assessed. And once we were getting him assessed, there's a lot of questions, and you have a lot of professionals around who then assess you. And so we decided while we were doing that my daughter and I would also take ourselves through assessments. Now, because of the clean language and the systemic modeling work I do, we've been working with neurodiversity and learning differences, for 25 years. That's what I do.
Yes.
And we look at it as patterns. So, I'm a bit like this, you're a bit like that. If you want to be at your best, I'll need to adjust this. And a lot of it's been, because I'm the facilitator, about working out other people's patterns. And because I'm very resourced, because that's what I do, generally going, I have more resources than them, so I will adjust.
Yes.
You recognize that?
Absolutely. I only learned the clean way of doing this and your systemic modeling way of doing this about 5 years ago from you. But I've always had this like, yeah, I'm going to take care of your needs more than anyone is taking care of mine because I can.
And I think particularly with you, with love and affection, probably more than me, I've always been a little bit robotic. But yes, you can see that to me, I couldn't do what you did. Even when I'm masking, I couldn't do what you did. It was a huge far away for me. But what I was doing, I was almost pathologically taking care of other people's needs. So then as we've started to get assessed, one of the things when you ask about, patterns and things, and I look back and I go, they'll say, oh, did Georgia, what was she like with friends? And I said, oh, well, she struggled in the playground. She found it overwhelming. So she organized the library. She'd come home and very excited about the Dewey Decimal System. And then I was like, what did you do during playgrounds? And I'm like, oh, I never went to the playground. I ran for 5 years. I ran cross country. If I could avoid a playground, I would, unless it was drama. And drama's interesting because drama allows you contact with rules because there's scripts. I think it's a little bit like Dungeons and Dragons. It's like, it's human contact. with some structure.
That's interesting. I've also viewed drama not so much as rules and contracts, but I've always tried to figure out like what's the play, what's the script beneath what people are doing.
Yeah.
And one of my dissociation abilities was I'm not going to play along unless I've seen the script. I'm not part of your game. That was part of me making myself safe in school when somebody was shouting at me, for instance, a teacher or somebody big. I was like, I'm not part of your game. I don't know the script to your play, and that was a dissociation technique for me. It still is.
And as well, mine's slightly different, which is what you're saying and what you're doing is not congruent, and therefore I don't have to agree. I didn't, I remember even quite young things like, well, I'm really disappointed in you. And I'd say, well, then you must have appointed me to the wrong place. That's a real shame for you. I don't know where you appointed me, but it was clearly incorrect because now you're disappointed. But either way, I didn't sign up to it. So, one of the things that I'm noticing at the minute, and I had thought it might be an age thing, as I know there are lots of, women who don't get diagnosed with traits early on because they're very adaptable. Mm-hmm. But there are men too who are very adaptable and have traits that they mask. And what I'm noticing at the minute is it's as though thinking about myself differently, thinking about myself like I was one of my children and not the person who has to look after and create the context for those children to thrive. I'm like, oh, actually, what do I want? What do I like? And I realized there was just a huge gap. There was what I did because I thought it was good for the world or good for other people, but that's not necessarily what I like. What brings my system joy. And so, yeah, that's a lot of my unmasking has been going, I'm going to have to get in touch with my feelings. I'm not sure that's a dirty job. I've managed to avoid those really well for a long time. But if I really want to know what I love and like, I'm going to have to also notice what I don't like. And just as you said, when am I really uncomfortable? When would I, by choice, if I have complete free will, just go, I'm not doing this, I'm out of here. Your feelings are not as important as mine, I'm just leaving.
Yeah. And one of the things, like I had this mantra for years, which I think served me well, that when I'm noticing discomfort, I must be learning something. So this is good. This is a great, let's see what kind of Olaf wants to develop here or whatever. So I've always had this like coaching, growth, etc. oriented view of myself, like, hey, okay, I can stretch into this or whatever. And it was totally disrespectful of what was happening inside of me. It was as I'm saying this now, in the same kind of growth that I'm going through now, I'm also noticing a lot of disrespectful things that I've done to other people because I was thinking that whatever happened was good for them in the end. And the fact that they didn't find it comfortable was something that was kind of the pain of the birth process, so to say. And I don't do that anymore. I don't like situations where we put in with good intentions, we put people into discomfort because we think that we can define what's to their advantage in the end better than they can.
Yeah. Well, so which then brings me to this thing, which I'm not sure what I think about, but it causes me difficulty. So in my own unmasking, I'm becoming a bit more demanding and a bit more vulnerable. My kids are noticing it. My partner's noticing it. They're all a bit like, are you all right? I notice my child comes every now and then, he puts his hand on me, says, you're right, Mum. I'm like, yeah, of course I am. But they've never had to do that because I'm always, that's the way it works. And anti-fragility and the ability of people to learn and grow through stress is really important to me. And I see around me something which I really object to in the neurodiversity field. I think, again, this is the stuff I don't know how much I really object to it. So I see different things. I see a child doing the best that they can, being mislabeled as naughty, stubborn, whatever, as I was when I was more obviously odd. And that mislabeling, creating shame and humiliation that the child has to manage, which is due to the lack of diligence on the part of the person with most power.
Yeah.
So I can see that. I've always seen it. It's a big part of my work is to help organizations, schools, families, workplaces to become not contemptuous, but curious. So that the minute they label somebody, they get curious. So you can see that. But I also see this other thing that's going on, which is, which could be where you're going to head for a little bit, which is it's your job as a facilitator, it's your job as a teacher. My child said it the other day. It's that teacher's job to make sure that we are in a good learning state. I said, Grover, it's not that person's job. That's a shared responsibility. You can't turn up, and your friends can't turn up, and as you do, as I know you do, as you know, maybe children have throughout generations, if you have a bet to see who can make the teacher cry as pupils, it is not the teacher's job to manage your behavior. So if it's not going to be hierarchical, if they're not allowed to beat you or, you know, send you out or expel you, and it's mediated, you are 100% responsible for your bit of that relationship.
Yeah, beautiful. Great example.
And so if some, you know, when I first went to Agile Alliance, I don't remember which one it was, maybe San Diego. And I went to the diversity and inclusion thing, and there was a, you know, tent created with cookies and milk, and there was a lot of stuff of, you know, you mustn't say these words and you mustn't say that word, and you can't say the B word or the F word or the other F word or the C word or the N word, and you can't. And I was like, whoa, I don't know these words, and surely we can say them. And that to me had gone down.
I remember that conversation. Yes,
it had gone down to another thing, which says, and this is what I'm worried about when I hear you. I say, so how fragile do we think we are? Like, is unmasking going to lead us to become fragile, and therefore, rather than advocating on an equal plane like the teachers and the kids, whine and complain and be bitter and criticize other people haven't kept us safe? That's the thing I'm worried about. Yeah.
And the way that I see you and I dealing with ourselves in this unmasking learning process is that we're not doing that, because we have left that blaming others for our own situation, that state we have kind of left behind, I think. My interest is currently, how do I set up spaces where this difference is possible and invited, and where people can have this learning with a little less pain? And I don't want to bubble wrap anyone. Yeah, I can give you an example. On Monday, I did a 3-day leadership training, as I do quite regularly. And one of the things at the beginning is an agreement or conversation about what atmosphere do we want to show up in, or what atmosphere do we want to create to work together in. And at some point I said something about differences, and that some people that I'm usually like people, and I know that are people, there are probably people in the room, it was 20-something people, who would not like to speak up in a group of that size and would prefer to be in the background. And then somebody else said, well, if this is a leadership training, those people don't belong here. And I said, wait a minute, this is an interesting statement. Let's unpack that. A few things I want to say here. First, you are all in one company. I don't know your selection criteria for leaders, and I also do not know your selection criteria for getting into this course. If this is what you believe, fine. I'm sure other people don't believe it or weren't as aware of this criteria as you are. The other thing is, I don't set this criteria. I want everybody here to feel welcome, even if you say that, and even if they are the people you think that don't belong here. So that's important to me. We can have a conversation about who is supposed to be and who's not supposed to be in the room, but that's not my conversation. I have a very clear stance on this, and you can have difference about this. And I want you to be okay saying something like this without you feeling excluded. And the person who might have felt addressed by what you said, I want them to be included as well, because I think this is how we learn.
Now,
and then I looked around. Obviously, everybody was paying full attention to that.
Yeah.
And I was looking around, and I was kind of first checking with my eyes, and then as people seemed to be okay, is this something we can agree on? Is this the kind of learning environment we want to create here for the next 3 days? And everybody was nodding, and everybody was raising their thumbs, and then we had kind of leveled up a little bit. And that person kept saying things that were uncomfortable to say. Most of them were more useful than this one, but he absolutely did a great job in actually increasing the safety of a group with this framing, and other people started speaking up, etc., etc. So,
so you've made that overt, Olaf.
Yeah.
So if that were in systemic modeling, the way I would do that, even traditionally, so not even with my new weird unmasking thing. So traditionally, if they said, so I would do it slightly differently. I would, if we would, as we go through some of the simple systemic modeling provocations, at one point, I would say, so let me just check who here is likely to speak up first, who likes to speak up, who likes to share ideas. Okay, and who here would it be put you in a really poor state if I put you on the spot or I demanded that you share in front of the whole group? And people will put their hands up. And I'll go, part of my job is to create a condition, the conditions so each of you can be at your best. And so you need to take responsibility for making sure that you do what you need to do to be at your best in this training. So then if this guy had said, if people don't want to speak up, then I would have asked them, a couple of clean questions about that. So the big thing in systemic modeling is you can name it, but you can't shame it. You can't shame him for speaking up. You have to be present to what is, which is that one person in this group believes this, but you have to be present to options.
Exactly.
So I think we would do exactly the same thing, but I would do it in attention. I wouldn't ever talk about it. I don't, at some other point we might discuss why that is, but with my, so one of the things that happens there is it creates multi-layer thinking. So he has to think his thoughts, but he's forced into a position where his thoughts are no longer true. They are just thoughts in relation. So you are forcing him to believe in the constructivist paradigm. Yeah. In the moment.
That's a systemic aspect about it. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I've been getting lately is this way of working is too erratic for me. I'm autistic. I need more structure. I need to know what's going to happen when. Now, the way I would normally deal with that is the same way I would deal with the guy that you just said. So, okay, so you're autistic. You need structure. What kind of structure? Where would that, where does that structure need to come from? But then I would go, and who's different to that? You don't get more sway than somebody else.
Exactly.
But then it comes back into the racism. This is the bit that I'm struggling with. So like with racism, because we live in a structurally racist and historically racist and colonialist world, there are things, the scales are imbalanced.
Yes.
And so asking somebody to take, so some of us, and the same in being neurodivergent, in a group where there are a number of neurotypical people, is you have been making adjustments, more adjustments for more time, more of your life. And so sometimes you get exhausted. And me demanding that an autistic person only has the same amount of space when they might have structural differences in their brain that mean that they don't have the same flexibility as a neurotypical person might have in that area. They might have 1,000 times more. I'm just,
yeah.
I think what I'm trying, so there are, if somebody was blind, which I've had, I don't say, well, I'm going to use the board anyway to stuff you. I make reasonable adjustments. And I think that's probably what I'm trying to get to. It's like, okay, so we're unmasking. How do we negotiate reasonable adjustments with our own system and not get too, I don't want to turn into a whining git.
Yeah.
And I don't want to walk around going, oh, look, I'm really hurt. I don't want to feel like that.
Yes. And I think, as in every relationship, we negotiate that with the group. So especially with this, so I didn't have a blind person yet in the training, but one thing I remember is where we had that was years ago, so way before COVID. We had a training in presence, like 20-something people in a room, and one person hadn't made their flight for reasons, and they were attending from home, so they had a face on a laptop. And with everything that happened, next right step kind of way, we discovered how to treat, I don't know the name of the name, let's say Mark, like who's going to take care of Mark? And what does Mark need? At some point he needed a break. So he took a break from the course because I can't, you are walking around and having fun all the time. I'm sitting in front of my computer fucking whole day. I need to go out for a walk. And that was before the time when everybody had smartphones and could participate in video calls with a smartphone. So he took a walk, and etc. So he took care of his needs. The group was aware that he had special needs, and they took care of it. The interesting thing at the end was that the group said, and that was in SAP, so a huge company, they said for every future training, we want one person to attend from home. The fact that we had to take care of him did did a lot more to our team building and to our team feeling and team cohesion and sense of community and belonging than anything we did in the training.
Yeah.
So I think what we need to do is we need to, and this is something that I try to be very active as a facilitator in, that I do not define for the group what anyone needs. One thing that happens often in leadership classes is that there's one woman. And do I go and tell them that they, and I'm creating a wide open space for lots of differences, and the way that this person might feel different because she's a woman in a group full of males. I don't know her. So she might have an issue with that. She might not, she might
love it.
There are lots of ways in which she might experience this. And I also do not, very similar to these, so one of the things I learned about neurodiversity, we're all neurodiverse. I don't think there's such a thing as neurotypical. Obviously, there are several things that are like most people, But in the end, when you drill down to it, especially when you talk about relationships, when you talk about communication, when you talk about how we think, etc., this is something that I learned mostly from you.
I think this is the bit that I'm struggling with here as well, because it's the stuff, you know, in the years I was doing diversity, racism, inclusion work, is when you're neurodivergent, we are all neurodiverse. And because I'm doing modeling with groups, every single person, it has a unique system.
Yes.
And those with trauma have a very different system from those without trauma. And there's all sorts of stuff like that. And if you are not neurodivergent, it's almost impossible to understand just how differently organized they are from you. Because you sort of go, oh yeah, well, you know, I'm a bit like this as well. And, you know, somebody said to me the other week, well, you know, but Caitlin, everyone hates admin. You know, you can't just say, oh, it's because you're ADHD. Everyone hates admin. You just got to get on with it. And I'm like, no, that's just not true.
Yes.
If you would say to me, oh, goodness, Caitlin, I've got 1,000 people in a room tomorrow. Will you come and speak to them for an hour? I'm like, yep. It does not hurt my system at all. Because I see huge amounts of things simultaneously. I can walk out into your room, you know, if you say, oh, can you just go and talk to them about bliss? This happened to me once. I went to a conference, somebody got literally hit by a bus. They said, they're supposed to be speaking about bliss. Can you go and do it? I'm like, yep. Doesn't hurt my system. Doesn't cost me anything.
Yeah.
It is a neurodiverse superpower. But if you want me to follow a recipe, twisting that huge thing that I've got to follow one thing that has to happen after another thing is excruciating. And it's as bad as I try to say to people who aren't neurodiverse, I say, just imagine somebody said to you, you have to walk out on stage and speak to 1,000 people. You don't have, it's horrible. That's how uncomfortable it is for me to do the things that, you know, a more left or right brained. Anyway, that's not even doing it. There's a neuromyth.
Yes.
So I do think we're all neurotypical, neurodiverse. Well, we are. That's by definition we are. But in terms of neurodivergent, I think it's very hard when you're in the middle and you have flexibility to understand what it's like to not have it. Do you know, in the same way, if you can see pictures and I don't, that's really hard to understand. Or if I hear music, you don't, it's hard to make sense of each other. Yeah.
But the fact that we do that at the beginning of group building, specifically with the visualization and the music, etc. Like I do this at the start of the class as well, so that people get, hey, this is not just about who is white or black or who is male or female. This is, oh, this is interesting. And what I get is that, and I think this is the history of discrimination. People come with a load of experience of trying to be who they are in a world that is more or less difficult for them. So some of us come with a history. In order to feel safe in a space like X, I need to do all of these things, or I need to be aware of all of these things, etc. And some of us just go in, sit down, and don't.
But this is like, so when we were masking, but that's part. So some people are coming in and masking. And masking, another way of looking at masking is in the drama triangle. Masking is rescuing the group.
Yes.
And so when there's one woman and 15 men in your training, you don't want to rescue them, because rescuing inadvertently makes you a persecutor and them a victim. It might get them, but there are still different. This is what I'm trying to get with the neurodiversity. There are still differences that will be outside of your awareness and mine. That means we might be making torture for them, and they might not know that they can get out of it because we haven't anticipated that level of, like when Pat and I, my training partner and I would go up to Sheffield, and I'd say, oh, you know, should we go out into town? Should we go out and have a drink? And he'd say, no. He said, I've had enough of being looked at. And, you know, in Sheffield, you know, being a large, handsome black man with, you know, waist-length dreads, attracted attention.
Yeah.
He needed to go somewhere where he wasn't on show.
Yeah.
But without him telling me, and before I couldn't think those things for him, and asking him to advocate, it was like he was already exhausted. I think that's what I mean. When are our groups already exhausted? And we do actually need to make reasonable adjustments before we're told to.
Making adjustments about something you are not aware of is difficult. The way I do that is asking. So I mentioned the atmosphere conversation. What atmosphere do we want to create together? And the second question in that exercise is, how do we want to show up when things get difficult? And the explicit explanation of that is, I would like you to think about what's difficult for you. I don't know what's difficult for you. I don't know what might be difficult for you, but I want you to make sure that when things get difficult for you, the things that we put on this flip chart are the things that you need. And second, I would like you to think about, if you are making things difficult for others, what would you need then? And I say, I usually make things difficult for someone in the room because I'm the trainer. This is a leadership training. It's a little bit designed to get people a bit out of their comfort zones. And the two things I'm asking for, if I make things difficult for you, is I would like feedback. I would like to know. And I would like, I don't know the English word for that. I would like you to forgive me, basically. I would like a second chance. And then I ask, is that okay for everybody else? Is that okay for everybody else if you do something that's difficult for someone, that we call this out and that we agree that we can speak about that?
So you're doing it by role modeling.
Yes.
So when Pat and I used to do diversity and inclusion stuff, we did it by role modeling our relationship, because there was always two.
Yeah. And
we did it neurodiversely, and we did it with race. We did it with both. So say, you know, who here knows that if you've got an agenda, we should go through each point and get it signed off so that we know where we are in the agenda and we should follow it. And then I'd roll my eyes on the other side of the stage and go, and who here knows that's just pedantic and boring and actually
beautiful, yeah,
work like that. And if you've got an idea here, it might link to this one, and we need to see how they link together, and then we can get the agenda done faster. And then so I'd have my people and he'd have his people. But obviously what we're role modeling is what you do with talking, is we're role modeling advocacy and self-agency.
Yes. And
self-responsibility.
Yeah, and the third question I ask is the most interesting one. And I say this is the most interesting question. If I think that Caitlin is having a difficult time, so usually people wear badges, so I name somebody and ask, so if I think they are having a difficult time, what do I do then? So we're basically making an agreement in the group that it's okay to speak up if things are difficult, that you don't need to rescue when you believe that it's difficult for somebody else. It's okay to ask if someone's okay, someone wants anything. But I won't, if I think that you are having a difficult time, I won't force you to unmask in front of the group.
Yeah. So I think we've probably gone a little bit, maybe it's into our comfort zones, which is what do we do as facilitators? Because obviously that's our job, and not what's going on for us.
Thank you.
But in terms of where we are in this conversation, let's stop, because that is, how do we create the conditions that probably, how do we create the conditions that we would like to have been created for us in order to join a group.
Yeah.
Because I know, in fact, I think it was when we were together in Oslo, I was asked, well, what do you do this for? Well, I do it to create, I do my work to create the groups that I would have had the confidence to have joined as a child. Because I didn't join groups, I simply ran. And
that's a big one.
And so what might be then interesting for us to do at a future conversation is to talk about right now unmasking for us as professional adults in our 50s. It like what? But let's end this one here. Let's do a little summary. So I think we're both doing it in different ways. You do it speaking. I used to do it by role modeling the relationship with a and I really miss having a partner to do that with. I think I realize now that's one of the things I've really missed. I'm going to go and find it. I'm going to go and find somebody to work like that with. And you do it as well by talking it through, and by you make it overt and say it. And I've been in systemic modeling, we make it overt by doing it. So it's not, and I do it and then ask them, what are we doing? And what are the rules here? And then we do it and I say, what are the rules here? And they're both, I think that some people struggle with the way I do that. And for me, I would struggle to be told, struggle to be told, because I'm a bit, demand avoidant. I don't like to be told that this is the rules. I'm like, and if you said, do you agree that these are the rules? I'll be like, no, because I'm a bit like that. Okay, but essentially what we're looking for is where it's okay to be yourself, and we're looking at shared individual rights and group responsibilities.
Yeah, I really like the frame that you had with talking with your son about the teacher. Like when you are setting up the teacher for failure, you are not fulfilling your part of the bargain. Yeah. And I think that's kind of, I hadn't thought of it like that before, so thank you for that frame. But that's how I try to set up the group, that everybody feels responsible for the whole, and that especially when I'm in a leading role, like the trainer in the training, that it's okay that people look a little up to me for certain things, but I want to share most of the responsibility for what happens in the room, because that's also the kind of leadership style that I would like to have in organizations. And also what you just said a minute ago about doing the stuff we do because we want to create what we would have liked to have as children, that resonates deeply. Yeah.
Okay, I'm thinking it might be interesting on our next conversation. Let's just see whether this one resonates with other people, but it might be interesting on the next conversation to have a couple of other people who are neurodivergent from us, and to have an unmasking conversation with maybe four.
Lovely. Yeah,
because there are similarities. You know, one of the reasons that we like working together and we like similar approaches is because it's our system. So it might be interesting to have a couple of people who are different from us, and then we'll learn even more. Yeah, not absolutely. Uncomfortable. You don't have to be uncomfortable to learn. Anyway, this is brilliant. I'm going to sign off. Thank you very much for this so far. Yes. Let's do it again.
Absolutely. Brilliant. Have a great weekend. Thank you. And thanks for the opportunity.